Hello and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Mike Kavanagh is an author, mind-body performance trainer, business and leadership consultant, and sought-after change catalyst. Mike is also the author of several books, including What is Your Calling? The Journey to Find Work You Love, and The Successful Manager, a guide to building and leading high-performance teams. He is the host of the podcast Fueled by Impact, a show designed to be a catalyst for people to take a risk and follow the pull toward a path of passion and impact in work and life. The show explores topics including pursuing your passion and purpose, leadership, entrepreneurship, inner well-being, and personal growth. He is on a personal mission to arm individuals, leaders, and businesses with approaches to dramatically enhance personal well-being and individual and team performance. Kavanagh has 2 decades of experience training and coaching people on a wide range of practices for enhancing personal well-being and performance, including formal training as a breathwork teacher, a meditation teacher, a behavior change specialist, and a fitness coach. Mike, what an honor to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me.
So what did I miss in that intro? Are you also an astronaut? Do you have a second home in the North Pole? Are you a Formula One driver? What else do you do?
Mike lacks focus.
You do everything. Oh, it's so cool. I'm so happy to have you on and have an interesting conversation with you. I do want to talk about the picture of you doing a human flag. I think that's one of the most impressive things anybody can ever do. That's the coolest photo. For the listener, if you can imagine hanging on to a flagpole and extending yourself completely horizontally, that was pretty cool, man.
Oh man, well, that was a little bit of when I was going through a phase of feeling like I needed to get more excited about exercise than I was. You know, you hit one of your ruts, and I just decided that the thing that I felt like was going to get me more committed to keeping with a more robust regimen was skills training, I guess you could say. So doing these things that I've seen people do that I, for my entire life thought, God, wouldn't it be cool to, be able to do a muscle up? What does that feel like? Or, other types of things like that. So that was that journey for me.
Wow, that's so cool. Before the pandemic, I was actually training John Absey, who was the jazz bear for 25 years in his career. And he, at age 50, was training himself to do a flag completely horizontally while people turned a pole 360 degrees and completely turned them around. And it was crazy. And it was such an interesting journey of building up grip strength and, hanging and trying to do all kinds of different things to build up that skill was quite a lot of work.
Yeah, well, and at 50, that's impressive. I feel like I turned, so I'm 41 now, and after I turned 40, I started dialing down some of the things that I felt like weren't worth the injury risk.
That's probably smart. And we're just outside of Salt Lake City, and so I'm still not over the Utah Jazz losing to the Chicago Bulls twice in the late 90s. I know. Are you a Bulls fan? You're in Chicago.
I adopted them. I'm not originally from here, but but I'd say I've adopted all the Chicago teams since I've been here.
Nice. That's great. Well, okay, so I want to hear your journey and I want to hear what it is you do, because it does seem like you just do everything, man. It's such a cool, interesting mix of so many different things, and you've found a really interesting and unique way to blend all of those things together and offer it up to people in a way that's really helpful.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I guess for me, so I kind of have 2 hats that are fairly distinct, but I think are starting to kind of come together. And so one is professionally, for the most part, for the last 15 to 20 years, I've been really in business, and it's been management consulting, advising senior leaders of large companies, and all of the kind of work that I was doing there was really straight up business and strategy and some leadership coaching. And then the other half, which was more of a side entree for me over the years, was all more of the personal well-being stuff. And so that included, you mentioned some of the things around meditation and breath work and fitness coaching. I actually probably got my start. The first place I started was in fitness. So, it was personal training and small group training. And then that led into, all right, how can I expand into other areas? And basically followed all the things that I personally wanted to learn, the way that they always say that you end up teaching the things that you want to learn. That was very much how I got zeroed in on the things that I'm doing today. And so now I'm kind of doing both of those things. And after I had like a chance occurrence, which was company that I was working for in a senior leadership role got sold, and there was a big leadership change up, and I was a victim of that. And so I was kind of left at a crossroads and was like, all right, what am I going to do now? And it was for me an opportunity to say, well, there's all these things I've been doing on the side that I want to be doing more of. And so maybe now's the time to actually go for that.
I think it's really easy to be in that kind of challenged position and to take more of like a victim mentality. Like, this happened to me. Why is this happening to me? And not doing what you did, which was pivoting and following your dreams. And so I'm curious, what do you think sets you apart from somebody else who maybe would take that as like, this happened to me, I'm a victim?
Well, there's probably a lot to that for different people. I mean, it's certainly mindset in general has been something I've been very focused on for a long time. I think, though, that when I first got into meditation, which for me was, it was in my early 20s and I was going through a rough patch. I would say, depressed by all counts. And there were a lot of external factors for why, but I got into meditation because it was like, all right, this seems like the most direct route to the thing that I'm actually after. So we're always chasing the external goal or I want this because, but you trace all that back. Okay, but what do you really want at the root of that? What's really driving you behind that? And for me, it was, happiness, well-being, whatever word you want to put to that. And so that led me to discovering meditation, which was a real game changer for me. And all of that practice that I'd been doing over the last 15 to 20 years, I feel like has been a lesson in you can't be too attached to anything, particularly roles and things that are going to come and going to go. And so I never felt like it was something that was really like a core part of my identity. It was just a stop along the way, a cool thing I got to do. And now I'm excited for what the next chapter yields.
So how did you get introduced to meditation?
To be honest, it was I had heard about it once, and it was this, to me, it was this esoteric thing. And even you think about like how much it's changed over the last 15 to 20 years, it was fairly fringe back then.
Sure.
And so I actually was living in Boston at the time, and I just went and checked out a whole bunch of books from the library. And that was my, public library card, entry into meditation. And then that, one thing led to another, snowballed into meeting different teachers, and then it became a real core part of my path. And so I was going on meditation retreats and joining different groups and making it a part of my daily practice. So there was a lot to it. I threw myself into it 100% because it was such a game changer for me on so many different levels.
That's so my style, dude. I would be right there with you. Like, whenever I learn about something, I'm in the library reading 10, 15 books about it all at the same time.
You're all in.
Yeah, all in. And then 3 months later, I'm like, not interested anymore. I'm curious, was there like a particular style of meditation that you were drawn to?
I guess my initial go was insight meditation, so Vipassana practice, for those who are maybe aware of that. So kind of derived from, say, Buddhist lineage, but in most of my teachers that I met along the way were more Western teachers who had kind of helped bring that practice from the East to the West. So it was kind of maybe more of an Americanized version of that in some respects. And then after that, once you get into it, you start to get curious. Okay, what else is out there? And I, started exploring other types of meditation. And that's actually what then led me to more breath-based practices and other sorts of things that I incorporated into my practice along the way.
What are some misconceptions that maybe you had about meditation in the beginning that turned out not to be true, or maybe misconceptions that most people would have? Like, I can't turn off my thinking. Why would I try to sit and do nothing when I can be more productive? Like, what are some misconceptions that either you had or most people have about meditation that don't tend to be true?
Oh, there's a lot. There are many. I think, one is it feels to people like it's this esoteric or almost like a woo-woo type of thing. And I think that's shifting a lot. I definitely had a little bit of that because I was very scientific and rational minded at that point. And I wasn't really interested necessarily at the time for some of the other maybe cultural things that would come along with it, or the religious elements that weren't necessarily what I was after. It was more, hey, I just want something that's going to help me feel better. And I really resonated with the fact that, oh, actually, this practice is very much at the root of go to the what is it that's causing you your mental strife or struggle or suffering? And that is all the stuff that's happening in your mind. And if you can train your mind the same way that you would train your body, you can build that muscle, so to speak, in a new way and open up new possibilities. So that was one. And I do think there were others along the way that I've seen as a meditation teacher that I hear a lot. You mentioned a couple. I mean, I think it's, it's boring, or there's no way I'm going to be able to sit there and do nothing. Or some people even come at it with, this feels very self-focused. Isn't that selfish? I really want to be out there in the world doing good. And they don't necessarily realize this is just another aspect of, you could call it self-care. I don't always love that term because it sounds squishy or self-focused, but really it is. It's like all these ways that we need to take care of ourselves so that we show up in the world as our best version of ourselves. And that is so important. And that is the furthest thing from selfish, and it's totally accessible. It does not have to be that hard. We tend to make these things very hard, and they're not.
That's a really great point. I think so I had a client who just finished an Ironman, which is really cool. And it was the day before, and she was sitting in her hotel room with not a lot to do. And we were kind of concerned that that was going to be the day that she would be, really worried or anxious. And she totally was. And so we were talking on the phone, and she was talking about how anxious she was getting and what she should do about it. And I kind of just told her, like, look, it's okay to be anxious. It's okay to be anything. It's just a temporary thing. You're going to travel 140 miles on your own tomorrow. Like, you should feel anxious. I think we label emotions as like good or bad. And like, we just want to go out and like squash all the bad and only feel good all the time. I think that's another thing that people misunderstand about meditation. It's like, no, it's okay to feel whatever emotion is already there, whether you think it's good or bad.
Yeah, I think that's extremely well said. And it's something that you're pointing at, something that I myself experienced, and partly too, because in the Eastern traditions where there's this kind of I'm on a path to enlightenment, and this is this grand goal at the end of the journey, whatever it is. And that creeps in, and there can be this misconception that there's almost like a transcending of the human elements of life, which is not the case at all. It's very much a dropping into, and the inner freedom, it actually comes from being okay with what is, with being able to just be here 100%, be present, and not push against whatever is happening in your experience, including some of those uncomfortable things. And therein actually lies the peace and the happiness that's actually surrounding all that when you make space for that.
That's so well said. I'm really curious, how were you able to take some of this stuff and apply it in the business world? Because those two things kind of don't seem like they would jive very well,
Yeah, it's been funny because I've been a little bit of, I even think about back when I was first getting into training people more on the fitness coaching side of things. And I was the crazy trainer who was trying to, get my clients to do meditation when they were showing up like, no, just, put me through workouts, whatever. No, this is going to help you just, 10 minutes a day. It doesn't take much. And I've taken the same approach at different points, stops along the way on the business side, which has been to actually try to incorporate even just holding meditation groups within whatever corporate environment I was potentially working at along the way, in order to kind of invite people into, hey, this is actually really good. It's great, clearly for stress relief. And that's the thing that obviously people tend to pay the most attention to. But increasingly, and this has been a big part of what I've been trying to focus on now, especially as I'm bringing these things together even more, is this is also really useful for performance. If you're in a difficult leadership position, for example, this is probably one of those skills, training the mind in this way, that is going to yield so many benefits that you're not even going to realize are are to be unlocked within you. You have all of this potential that a lot of your kind of mental narratives and different things that might be happening subconsciously that you're not aware of, that those things are actually holding you back in so many important ways. They're draining you of energy. They're making you not show up as your best self. You're making you approach difficult situations not as ideally as you might otherwise. So that's been a big focus for me. It's something that I've seen personally has been huge for me, because I think I run a little bit anxious, and that was something that I saw, wow, I can get up in front of huge audience of people and give this talk, even though I'm, maybe normally that would be really uncomfortable. And a lot of that has been because it's, I've embraced this tool and learned and seen how much it can help me through those types of situations.
How are you able to convince, let's say, like a CEO of a company, or, a board of directors or something, that what looks like, company-wide, everybody doing nothing for 10 minutes, what a huge loss of productivity, is actually really productive? Is that a difficult message to get across?
It is for certain people. And I think a lot of this has to do with, like any shift culturally, it takes time. There's sort of like leading edge people, and then there's, eventually things become more mainstream. And I think we're seeing it now, and we've seen this shift over the last 5 to 10 years with, the big apps like Headspace and Calm, and more embracing of this at a total population level means there's just more people who happen to be in leadership positions who buy into the fact that, hey, it might not be immediately obvious where's the ROI, but I know there is one because I myself practice it and I know how much it's benefited me. And that's so, I don't tend to focus very much on trying to convince people of something that they may or may not realize could be good for them. For me, it's more like, go to the people who already say, yeah, I know this would be beneficial. Now I just want to help bring this to my team. Can you run a workshop? Can you do this? That to me is like more where I'm focused, and then allowing the tides to shift on their own, culturally speaking.
Interesting. Just top of your head, like first story that comes to mind. It could be something recent. It doesn't have to be huge, or it could be, maybe one of your biggest accomplishments. I'd be really curious to hear a story about a team or a business that was changed by some of your work.
Well, the one that comes to mind for me is more personal, which is that one of the places that I worked, a colleague of mine, both of us he's a big fitness guy, and he teaches classes. He's been kind of group exercise instructor, and he and I kind of got together and just created this program. And it was basically this sort of a 3-part program. So there was a meditation or mental component to it. There was a straight up fitness, let's burn you and help you get in great shape. And then there was a nutrition component to it. And we just, out of I'll say the joy that came from just doing it because we love it, as well as with the receptivity at this particular company, we were kind of able to get this set of classes going. And, we did some of the teaching. We eventually got more people involved who were also teachers in different domains. And it became almost like a self-fulfilling thing where even once he and I stepped back, a core group of people ended up keeping this program going. So there was no centrally managed top down, hey, there's this thing, you guys should really show up. It was all, hey, come if you're interested. If this is something that speaks to you, it's just a couple of your colleagues who are leading this thing and trying to do some good. And if you want to show up, show up. If you don't, no big deal. And if you want to get involved and help out, then that would be awesome as well. So that to me was huge. And I would love to see more of that kind of thing happening, because a lot of times that bottoms up organic is so much more powerful, especially in a workplace environment.
Wow. Especially, with a group that's always working together. That really is amazing. It's always amazing to me that the spiral can go both ways. Like you eat the ice cream on Tuesday night and it's like, man, okay, now I'm not going to go to the gym on Wednesday. Now I'm going to get poor sleep and stay up too late. and it spirals downhill, but it also can spiral uphill. You get the workout in, so now you feel a little better. So now you're more motivated to eat a little bit better, and then you get better sleep, and it goes both ways. That's such a cool example of that. I'm very curious. What were some of the core principles for both the fitness and for the nutrition coaching that you guys were sharing with some of these groups?
Yeah, so for the fitness, we were focused very much on trying to offer people some degree of balance. And so we had strength, cardio, flexibility, mobility were sort of the core underpinnings to the program. And so people could come to any classes that would have different focuses there. And so if they were just like, hey, I'm looking for some, higher intensity type of offering, or if other people more comfortable with, hey, I'd like something that feels more like the yoga classes I'm listening to or I'm attending. And so that was part of it. I would say underpinning all of it was very much focused on a lot of functional types of activities. And so even the flexibility, mobility was very much like, we would incorporate functional movements and functional movement patterns. So that was a big part of it. And then on the nutrition side, we brought in a dietitian who focuses very much on the concept of mindful eating. And in particular, her approach, which I really like, is very often people from a nutrition standpoint, there's a lot of should do this, should do that. And we all feel kind of like judged, even if it's by ourselves. There's so much almost like taboo, and oh, I shouldn't be, it's bad if I'm doing this, I'm being bad if I eat that. And she was like, no food is bad. No food is bad. There are better foods and worse foods for sure. But for this, it's more about changing your relationship to food and getting back to slowing down and really understanding, and almost like an organic shift yourself that's happening toward making choices that are going to pay off in the long run, not because of some external I should, or I'm trying to lose weight or whatever, but actually almost like a very slow changing of your palate that happens when you start to see, hey, these foods are the ones that make me feel better. They bring me more energy. And just invariably, they tend to be more organic whole foods is kind of the underpinning thing that kind of results from that.
Man, I love that. That's great. I think we could do so much more with food and mindfulness, getting people to slow down, put their fork down between bites, really taste the food, really appreciate what flavors are there. How many meals have you eaten in your life that you weren't even present for? You just scarfed a bunch of food down, or like bites are going in when you haven't even finished chewing the last one,
For sure. Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. I really wanted to talk to you about one of your books. What is your calling? The Journey to Find Work You Love.
Sure.
I want to know, how do we know if we are pursuing our calling, or is the problem that we need to be happy regardless of whatever we're doing in the moment, whatever that is?
Oh, that's a phenomenal question, because you're poking right at the heart of what actually caused me to write that book.
Well, it was
So
really weirdly phrased, so I'm glad you at least understood.
I totally was tracking. So man,
Good.
yeah. So what I it is a very personal book for me. It was something that in many ways was almost like 10 years in the making. And part of this was because I was sort of almost like leading these two lives my whole professional journey, where I got into this business track, and I was fortunate enough to get channeled into a very sort of rapid climb in certain respects. And so that almost like swallowed me into this gravitational field in a way. And what I found was there were points along the way where I actually just was not feeling fulfilled. There were certain roles or certain stops along the way that just didn't really speak to me at a deeper level. I didn't feel like, what is the meaning behind this? Is there a sense of purpose behind this? And meanwhile, I had all these side passions that I was devoting not nearly as much time as I wanted to, and almost like dreamed of making them more a part of my livelihood. But there were things they felt more out of reach. There were things that either I knew would take a while to scale up and be able to be a meaningful entree from a financial standpoint, or they were things that just in general don't historically pay very well, like writing books. Unless you happen to, have a bestseller, you can't necessarily count on that if you've got mouths to feed, including your own. So for me, it was wrestling with that over the years and realizing I was not necessarily on a path that was fully true to myself. And when I finally hit that crossroads point, which was in part externally driven, I had been primed to know that, oh man, this is the time. If not now, when? And so the very first thing I did was, I went on my own journey of really looking within and trying to understand, okay, what am I going to do next? And one of the things that flowed out of that was this book. It was sharing my own perspective on how you can answer this question in your own life, and what are some of the actual practical tools and techniques to be able to discover it, because a lot of us struggle with one of two or both problems, which is, number one, I don't know what I want. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what brings me passion. I don't know what brings me joy. Help me discover that. And that is a hard problem to get underneath. And then number two is, okay, I actually do kind of know what I want, or I very much know what I want, but I'm not sure how to make that a reality. There's all these, the steps that I need to take. Maybe they're not 100% clear. How do I do that? So I was trying to put together a very broad strokes end-to-end journey for people to go on and actually try to make it practical enough that they could implement some tools. And so getting back, that was a very long-winded way, getting back to your question, I wrestled with a lot of the reasons why I stayed on my path was I wrestled with your question, which was, well, shouldn't I just be happy where I am? And I think that there is truth to that there is a degree of contentment that can come in any situation for the most part, regardless of external circumstances. And that's a lot of what almost for me, the path of meditation was leading me toward. But I got locked in that mindset and realized, no, actually, for me, maybe because I'm not enough of an advanced meditator, maybe there's some point where that would be okay. But I could tell that for me, no, I'm actually denying a really important aspect of myself. And if I don't make these changes to my life, to my external circumstances, there's a degree of lack of contentment that could continue throughout my life. So that was a very long answer to your question.
Wow. Well, it was a very thoughtful one. Those two scenarios that you described, the first scenario being, I don't know what I want. The second being, I do know what I want, but I don't know how to get there. My money is way more on the former and less on the latter. In your experience, is that something that you found as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think most of us are not necessarily taught to ask ourselves these questions and to really listen. And then sometimes we do, and we get inconvenient answers and we push them down, and we maybe aren't even consciously aware that we do know what we want to do. And a lot of that has to do with the societal and parental and familial types of influences that happen, where it's like, no, I need a stable job, or no, this is what's a more culturally acceptable or awesome job to have. So I'm going to go down this path, even though my heart's potentially telling me something else. So I absolutely 100% think that that's the case. It's also the harder challenge because, hey, at least if you've got a goal, then, there's something you can do. You can start down a path and try to get there. It tends to be the case that unless your goal is something completely outrageous, like me trying to, get into the NBA right now, most people can, at least do something toward their goal and, end up in the ballpark of what they wish if they're willing to put in the work.
Wow. So why is it that I would rather spend more than a decade working a very high pressure personal training job and tons of it's sales and commissions and all this stuff versus, after the pandemic, just sitting down for like an hour and being mindful about what I wanted life to be like? Why would I work so hard to avoid the original question, which is, what do I want out of life?
Why would you, Casey? You tell me.
It seems like the mental work that you would need to do to create your life seems so difficult, but it's really not. And it's so much easier to just like sit down and be really honest with yourself and understand like what's your budget, what things will bring you joy and happiness in your life. And I would rather just avoid that and go, work a soul crushing job for 13 years. And I'm so glad the pandemic helped us, kind of slow down and take a look at that. But I think a lot of people are in that same situation.
Absolutely. And it's fear. A lot of it's fear. We get stuck in a routine and patterns, and it feels really uncomfortable to take a look at something, sometimes because of what might come out of that. Like, oh boy, what if I discover that really, I need to take a hard left and it's going to impact my family, or it's going to, what are other people going to say, or what are they going to think? And so I think a lot of those fears hold people back from even getting to that point. And it's understandable, but usually it's like the boogeyman in the closet. Like, it's never as bad as you think it's going to be. And you just do need to take that time, like you said. And it's great when something bad, like a pandemic, that there can be a silver lining, that it forces people to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and say, hey, I'm not going to be here forever. Like, I should enjoy this life.
Yeah, I love that. I just finished for the second time an audiobook called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. And it's so amazing. It's like, that's basically kind of like an average lifespan is 4,000 weeks. And when you think about it that way, like that's not a ton of time, and probably worth a little bit of that time to sit down and really decide like, what do you want? You mentioned practical tools to help determine, whether you're in the right field or doing what you love. Can you explain a little bit what some of those tools are?
Yeah, so a fair amount of it is questions for reflection. And so you probably did this even on your own as you were taking a step back at that point at the pandemic and saying, hey, what do I really want out of life? And so some of these are questions that either came along the way into my awareness through other people who I probably won't remember to credit. But, some of it's questions for reflection. An example would be things like, what might I do with my life if I knew that I couldn't fail? Or what if, money was no object? Or what if I had 10 years left to live? And I was gonna leave this earth as a fully healthy human, but I got 10 good years left. What would I do? And so taking the time with different prompts is one aspect that can at least show you themes and unlock things. There's also, for me, I teach, and I use this in a lot of different circles, but I definitely use it on this career question, which is using the power of meditation and creating a meditation-based practice to allow some of these things to bubble up for you. A lot of times what happens is, and even people have this experience, I wonder if you've had it yourself through any meditating that you've done, but the minute you get quiet and there's a silence that comes over, a lot of stuff starts to come up that you otherwise would not have been aware of. And sometimes in there is either clue or an actual answer to a question. And so what I do is I lead people through a process of planting a question. And it's essentially a combination of journal/meditation that allows you to kind of plant in your subconscious these deeper questions, and then create the space so that your subconscious can kind of do its work. And then amazingly enough, it's almost like planting seeds. Things start to sprout, and all of a sudden you're waking up maybe the next day, or maybe after a meditation session, or whenever it is, after a period of not thinking about it, you're waking up with a new insight.
Wow. That's so cool. So is that kind of a practice you want to do before bed?
Yes, that's one of the great times to do it. I think before bed is phenomenal because of that benefit. I mean, it's amazing how many things that you can get an answer to, like just plan it in your head right before bed and then wake up the next day. So yeah, that's a good one. And then also I think before meditation is another good opportunity to do it.
Yeah. Wow. I absolutely love that. One of the questions along those lines that was given to me a few years ago, and I actually did it. I'm surprised that I did it. I'm so glad that I did. And I saved it in my phone in my notes section was, if there were no limitations, what would you want your life to be like in 5 years? There's nothing to stop anything that you truly want. And it was really nice to get really, thoughtful about that. And you're right. It's interesting. The subconscious just kind of drifts in that direction. And before long, you're kind of gaining some of those aspects of things you thought you wanted in life. It's like, you do some of the work, and then, the universe, the world, or the muse, or whatever you want to call it, is kind of giving you like signposts along the way. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. That question could be in the next edition of the book.
Well, I don't know who he stole it from, but don't give me any credit for it. You also have a new book, Coach's Plan. Can you tell us a little bit about the Coach's Plan?
Yeah. So this one, again, I mean, there's a theme here with my books. It's like born out of my own personal struggles. I had a very humbling kind of experience, which I'd be interested to hear if you've experienced this yourself. But when you're in a domain like personal well-being, like helping other people, whether it's, training people in fitness, or it's, whatever it is, there's always this, if you're doing it well, you're also living it, you're walking the talk. But sometimes you fall off the wagon. And it can almost feel a little awkward, because you're like, all right, here I am going through my own low point. And yet, I'm trying to help other people and lift them up. And they're looking to me in some ways as a form of inspiration and motivation potentially. And have you had that?
Yeah, totally.
Make me feel better.
Oh, totally. Yeah, dude, we're all on the deck of the Titanic taking selfies, and like we're listing on the way down. Like I feel like all of us are in the same struggle all the time. Yeah, totally. I'm so curious about this.
Oh, well, if it even happens to Casey, I feel better.
Jeez. Yeah, don't gain any hope from my experience. I'll tell you that.
Well, so my experience happened as I was going through this transition. So, I got okay, I know what I want to do. I'm super excited. I need to charge down this new kind of entrepreneurial path. And I just kind of got knocked over in a lot of ways. And so part of it was just from a personal productivity standpoint. I was really struggling to get things done. And it was a combo of procrastination, but also I would work long hours and work very hard, but I wasn't necessarily doing the hard things. The things that you have to do if you want to be successful, but are just uncomfortable. Like, for me, that I placed cold calling and selling and things like that in that category. Anything self-promotion, I'm just like, it's not my thing. And I then I saw that I was not having the kind of results and the performance that I would normally have. And at the same time, all that was happening, I was kind of falling off the fitness wagon in a way that I hadn't in a really long time. And then timing wise, pandemic for me was interesting because it did have, pandemic, and we had a baby, my wife and I. So it was, a lot of change on the home front, and, trying to also get something off the ground business wise while all this was happening meant that there were just a lot of habits that I wasn't necessarily doing. So I just didn't feel like my best self. It was basically boiling it all down. I was like not doing great. And I was struggling with something that was like, all right, I know what I need to do, but I'm not doing it. Well, why is this? And if you think about that, that's true of pretty much anybody. Even though it's awesome and wonderful for us to, get coaching and, hire experts to help us out and so on and so forth, that is amazing. But if you even just took the knowledge that you have today about how to live your best life in any dimension, and you actually followed through on it, you'd be a downright superhero. Like you really would. And so knowledge wasn't the barrier. And I realized it's like I had this, humbling reminder of this is exactly what everybody's struggling with. This is the huge part of the people who come to me for support at different points along the way. It's not that they don't know what they want or how to even go about it. It's that they're stuck in some way, or they're not sure how to translate that into action. And so what happened to me was I had this realization that, it's two selves or more than one self. We're all this inner ball of internal conflicts. And one day you're like, all right, and usually for me, it would be like the end of the day. All right, tomorrow I'm going to do this, and it's like, yeah, I feel good. I'm going to do all those things. And then the next day rolls around and like a completely different Mike shows up. And that Mike is like lazy on the job. He's not, I think I'm going to toss that to the side. And that realization of this like disconnect in these multiple selves birthed this insight or this idea that I had, which has now become Coach's Plan, which is what I use to describe this system, which started off as really focused on personal productivity, but then became a entire sort of way for me to unlock behavior change potential in myself. And so now I use this system. It's like what started as a entrepreneurial way to kind of make sure I was filling in my time and being as productive as possible. I now use that system. And then I started layering on other things like, all right, Mike, you're, housing cookies and ice cream every night. Maybe we can use Coach's Plan to free yourself of that habit right now. And sure enough, I'd throw that on there and boom, like without any effort, things were changing like that. Back on the fitness wagon, daily exercise again. So it was just a really powerful, humbling experience that turned into a silver lining that I then was like, all right, I can't be the only person like me. There's got to be other people or even just one other person out there who's like me, who could take this system and run with it and have the kinds of results or impact in their life. So I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to put it out there, even though it's like not the type of thing I would normally write. And and now it's a very short book that probably would take somebody an hour to read or, an hour and a half to listen to. And it's out in the world as of now. And I'm hopeful that it helps change some people's lives.
That's amazing. I love that. I'm really curious related to, the book we talked about earlier and this book. How do we know whether something we're procrastinating is something we, need to do and that's our life's calling or whatever, and we just have to get through it? Or how do we know that is a sign that also says we're not in our life calling and we're procrastinating it for a very good reason?
Well, I think in general that if you detect fear, then go in the direction of that fear. That to me has been by and large, a principle that if I follow tends to lead to good things, because usually if you're procrastinating or you're not doing something and there's a really good reason behind it, then it's not likely to be, oh man, I'm just afraid, an irrational fear of it. If there's an irrational fear, it's usually like, oh, I'm worried about how this is going to look, or I'm worried about whether or not I'm going to go hungry, or, some kind of, it's like the fear is hijacking our higher wisdom and just turning us into turning us into being governed by more of our animal instincts in some way, our survival instincts. So that to me is one way potentially that I look at, aside from trying to go deep and explore and do other things. I try to sniff out the fear.
Wow, that is so profound. I love that. And so the fear is the signpost that says, yes, you're on the right track. Does it force you to put more of your life force behind whatever decision you're about to make?
Yes.
That is super profound. I absolutely love that. I'm curious, it's just weird in 2020, hindsight and the year 2020, looking back on all the things that we collectively went through. I think there was, the people that, again, were more victims during that time. And there were other people like you that decided to double down, face that fear and create new content. Tell me a little bit about what this last year has taught you about resilience, and strength.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I hope it's taught a lot of people that. I think the first thing I have to say is I I have I did not have things nearly as hard as so many people out there. And so, it's I couldn't even possibly stand here and say, oh, I like handled this well, compared to when you think about, I have no idea what it's like to have gone through some of what people have gone through. And that's not to say it wasn't an extremely challenging time for me, because it was in many ways, but I also just want to honor the fact that for people who are going through really tough times, sometimes like anybody would get knocked over by that. And so, it's good to remember that and not to take on board. Sometimes I think what happens is we can be so hard on ourselves. We are such difficult judges of ourselves. And so it's okay to, to be knocked over and to go through low periods, and there's no judgment there. But I think a couple of the things that I've learned from a resilience and strength standpoint, one has been a perspective shift about, maybe I sometimes think about it as like seasons, where I've gone through these phases where I know that it's just a season and it's going to pass. And so I don't need to, it allows me to be a little bit more patient and more open with the stuff that's happening that I don't want to happen. And that for me has been useful, because sometimes it can feel like we all want it now. We want whatever we want, and we want it now. And we want the bad to go away now. And to just remember, like, hey, this is just a season. And winter's going to pass, and spring's going to be on its way. That to me has been really valuable. And I think the other thing that just for me, and this might be more personal, but I've also become more flexible in terms of even like writing What Is Your Calling, and thinking about, I've always known that it's not like you necessarily have one thing, right? You might have one thing right now, or you might have multiple things. You might have one thing for this phase of your life, and then there's something else that calls to you later. But even those things that call to you, the mindset of remembering to be open and flexible, and sometimes the best things that come to us are not at all like the things that we thought we wanted, and B, sometimes they're bad in the moment. They feel bad, and yet they were almost like the soil that, the wonderful new stuff grew out of. And so for me, I've also been trying to be flexible. And so that's been everything from like career wise to saying, hey, how these things are going to unfold, I'm going to be a little bit more open. I've got a general direction I'm going. I've got kind of a vision, but it's not necessarily up to me exactly how that unfolds. That's been really valuable for me as well.
That is absolutely amazing. One of my very favorite books is The Tao of Pooh by Benjamin Hoff. And he makes the point that even when it's with our own self-improvement, wanting to be better, to learn, to grow, you don't need to go out and try to destroy every part of your life right now. Like, be, like you said, like patient with the process. You don't need to, fix every single mistake. You don't need to be perfect at everything. You can allow that to happen over time and just get used to the process. I think that's super wise. I love that.
That's a book that I too have to say. And anybody who hasn't read it, it's worth it.
So good. So good. Yeah, definitely one of my favorites. So you have been podcasting for quite a while. So you were the host of the Back to the Breath podcast. Remind me, we talked a little bit before we started recording. Are you still doing that podcast?
So it's, I have not touched it in a while, although I intend to go back to it, in part because I feel I can only handle putting out podcast content on one at a time. And I shifted gears to Fueled by Impact. And so Back to the Breath has been sitting there waiting for some love that it will eventually get if and when things slow down a little bit.
Dude, just say you do seasons. If all you do is say I do seasons, then it allows you to take as many breaks as you want. There you go.
And not like the all the like the gazillion abandoned blogs that are out there from like the year 2002 or something.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. Totally. I want to know, both podcasts are great. I listened to several episodes of Back to the Breath. I've listened to several of Fueled by Impact. You do some, shorter episodes where you just give some really practical tips, which is great. You also do some great interviews. I'm curious, how has the process of podcasting grown you as a person?
Oh gosh, in so many ways. I mean, for starters, it gives me I'm very bad at it connecting with people in general in terms of like cold reach outs. And what's been really cool about the podcast is it forces me to get over that and has allowed me to then connect with so many awesome new, people who I never would have otherwise had a reason to reach out to. So that for me has been really big. And I also, I love it in general. I enjoy the creativity and the sharing aspect of podcasts. It's been, for me as a podcast listener, I've gained so much in my life through all of the podcasts that I've listened to over the years. And so I love to just be like a part of that ecosystem and creating things and putting things out there and hoping that, hey, maybe this will fall in the right ears at the right time and actually help somebody, have a better day or, give them an idea that they didn't otherwise have. So for me, that has also been like exercising this other creative muscle that I didn't get a chance to exercise a whole lot over more of my corporate years.
Wow. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's amazing. You are a tremendous host, and you're not one that likes to talk over your guests, which I can't stand. How has podcasting made you a better listener?
I think that in general, the fact that I don't know for you, like I go into an interview and I have things like a very rough outline of things that I would definitely want to touch on, like topics or themes, but invariably the conversation is going to go where it's going to go. And so for me, and actually I had to throw out, I just did an interview with a guy and I haven't, it's not out there yet, but it probably will be within the next week or so. So maybe when this is out, but he's in improv and he said something so insightful about how improv helps with listening that I felt like I resonated 100% with like learning around interviewing people and podcasting, which is you throw away your tendency to think about what's the next thing that you want to say. The other person in improv is going to tell you what the next thing is. You have to be fully there for them and have them, see what's coming out of them in that moment to actually know the next thing that you're going to say. I thought that was really cool and something that totally applies to just like a really good, authentic conversation too. Stop, thinking about what you want to say next or whatever it is that we all tend to do. And even I still, default to sometimes. Podcasting like forces me to turn that off and really just like be fully present, listening to what somebody's saying. So then I can feel where curiosity wants to pull me next.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. Very well said. One of your podcasts, I believe it was a few months ago, you talked about the one lesson that changed your life. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. So actually this one happened. I was, the backstory is I was on a meditation retreat actually. And there was usually they're silent for the most part. And, I got there, it was like a day early because I had to fly and I was staying there. And I met this gentleman who was there on the retreat. And I was not in a great headspace at that time. And I was there largely because of that. And so we were just connecting and sharing. And he was just listening the whole time, just listening. And I guess I didn't realize it until after the fact, but I was probably just venting mostly about, things I didn't want or, whatever, this, that. And he just looked at me and was like, your problem is that you wish you didn't have problems. And it was like, pow. Just knocked me like in. It was said with so much warmth and empathy, not judgment at all. And I just felt like, oh man, like that just hit me so hard. And so, yeah, that was the inspiration for that.
Wow. I love that. There's a question that I heard you ask on the last podcast with Scott, I believe was his name, right? The ultra marathoner.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. There was a question that you asked that I want to turn around and ask you. What would you want someone to take away from your life and your message?
Oh, oh no.
So I also keep a list of questions that I steal from other podcasters that are just like generally like very interesting. Like, what's one thing you wouldn't want me to ask you? Or what's a proverbial mountain you're climbing right now? And I got to tell you, I'm stealing this one too, and it's going to make that list.
Oh, well,
Love it.
that is awesome. I don't even know where it came from, but I remember when I was asking it to him, I was like, I feel bad. Like, this is not this, like, if somebody threw this question at me, I'd like duck for cover and run.
Karma, Mike, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. I love it. I think for me, it's that it reminds me of a quote by Gandhi. And, you know, somebody asked him a question like, what's your message? You know, and his response to that was, my life is my message. And I think that I am on a path of trying to make something like that true for me, which is to say that the way that, you know, my kids seeing me live my life, for example, I don't need to tell them what to do or what's best or what have you. I want it to be that you can just see how I'm living, and that's enough. You don't even need to hear me say it, that's enough. And so I'm a long way away from that. I got a lot of work to do on cleaning myself up, but that's my aspiration, and that's my hope that one day people can look at that and say, yeah, you know, wow, he lived a good life.
I love that. My wife and I were just talking about this not too long ago, and I wonder if that's like the only thing you can actually truly do is just live as best of a life as you can and find your inner peace and happiness. And outside of that, you might not have a ton of other influence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's so awesome. Tell us how you are working with people these days.
Well, so a lot of my work these days has been more through corporate avenues, although I am doing still a little bit of one-on-one and sort of private work. And so the main way has been through different workshops and as well as coaching on the corporate side of things, but very much infusing all of the inner well-being and the various practices that I brought to bear around helping people with both performance and well-being in their leadership roles. And then everything else for me, I've got out there. People can find me at my website's like the best place because it's got all the kind of books and the podcast and the social routing people. And that's MikeKav.com, MikeKav.com.
Yeah, and you put out so much content in any format you could ever imagine. You're on there in videos.
You're one to talk, Casey.
Jeez, man, I do.
You're prolific.
We do 3 a week of podcasting, but that's it. Like, I'm not writing, like I'm not creating videos at all. Like, you're doing everything. It's really cool. I love the concept of your courses. You're still doing the self mastery for leaders course. Is that right?
Yeah. So that is all kind of on demand. People can do it as they go. It's a very like a holistic, whole person approach to kind of well-being and performance that's kind of targeted at people in sort of up and coming high potential leaders.
Well, that's just one of the things I really respect about you is you're able to marry all of these different ideas together. Like so many people would just say like East is East and West is West, and these two things don't really jive together. How are we going to bring not doing something, what looks like not doing something in meditation into high pressure corporate world? And you've been able to kind of fill in that gap and come up with so much great content. It's really amazing. This has been an awesome conversation, man. I'm blown away by some of the stuff that you've been able to teach us. I'm wondering if you had one simple tip that you would like to leave with the listener, what would that be?
I think it's, you have the answers, so you just got to trust yourself.
Beautiful. I love it. Mike Kavanagh, one more time, can you tell people where they can go to find you, find your work, and connect with you?
Yes, MikeKav.com, MikeKav.com. And Casey, I appreciate you having me so much. This is a blast. I've really, really had a good time, and I really am deeply honored.
Yeah, well, it's been an absolute honor to have you on the show. I mean, if I just your comment about the fear that is so impactful and meaningful, and like that punched me right in the face. So that we're so just grateful for you and for your work and for your wisdom and for sharing that with us. Definitely gonna have to get you back on another time to talk about your future work. And been a tremendous guest, and we're so honored to host you. So thank you so very much for everything that you do.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.